Good morning, everybody. Let's get started. So, good morning. Welcome to today's Biognosys Breakfast Seminar. Thanks for being here this early, and thanks for choosing us this morning. We have a very exciting program ahead. This is the event where we launch the much-awaited new Spectronaut 16 version. My colleague Oliver Bernhardt will go into details about it, but the improvements are very significant for aspects that are some of the most important aspects for proteomics software, in my opinion. And then after that, we have the absolute pleasure of having Birgit Schilling as a guest speaker for us. She will present a very interesting project about ischemic kidney injury and why she uses Spectronaut for her analysis and some improvements that the new version comes compared to the previous version. But first, let me very, very briefly introduce our company and our product portfolio. Biognosys has been in the game of proteomics innovation for more than 13 years now. We have a strong scientific foundation and an R&D-centric mindset. And we are inventors and developers of unique proteomic solutions with 21 granted patents on our technology that is used widely by the scientific community, that has helped producing thousands of publications by now. We also have one of the largest facilities, mass spec proteomics facilities in the world, that we use for our contract research projects. And of course, we also offer products. In our product portfolio, you can find kits, peptide kits for quantification, peptide kits for quality control, and also one sample preparation kit with a focus on reproducibility. We also offer software, as you all probably know. We have a software for every proteomics application. We have Spectronaut for DIA analysis. We have SpectroDive for targeted proteomic approaches. And we have SpectroMine for analyzing DDA acquired in data. We are going to hear more than enough about Spectronaut today, but I wanted to show you one slide for the other two software that I mentioned. SpectroDive, as I mentioned, is our software solution for targeted proteomics. The focus of SpectroDive is to minimize the effort required by a targeted proteomics project by, for example, having a very easy custom panel generation, automated FDR control. It also has assists you in having a very precise scheduling with the high precision IRT calibration, and also has some machine learning algorithm for peak picking for accuracy. SpectroMine is our solution for analyzing DDA data, and the focus here was the highest proteome coverage, meaning more IDs, and the fastest analysis that compared to other solutions in the market. And our all of our software rely on 3 pillars. Those are performance. Our software performs better than other alternative solutions in the market. Reliability and trust in our results and by the scientific community, and also ease of use. Our software solutions are the most intuitive and the easiest of use in the market. So if you want to try them yourself, we offer for all of them trial periods for free, that supported by a team of scientific experts, so to help you be successful with the trial. We also have a pricing strategy that benefits academic organizations. We have discounts for bundles, and we also offer different licensing models to fit your particular budget. If you are interested in trying them out, please contact us or pass by our booth, which is number 306, yes? Or drop us an email to software@biognosys.com, or go visit us in our website, and you can find very easily your way through the trial request. And before handing over to my colleague, Oli, I wanted to remind you that we have a second breakfast seminar on Wednesday with other 2 very nice advocates for our software, Jesper Olsen and Jiansheng Liu. And we also have a very interesting scientific program. We have 2 oral presentations on our True Discovery platform, so discovery projects, They unfortunately happen at the same time, so you have to either choose or flip a coin. And we also have a handful, quite some posters that I think my colleague Oli is going to go through most of them, so I didn't mention them here. And with that, I would like to hand over to Oliver Bernhardt and Spectronaut 16.
Thank you very much. Oh, I need the, that's big. Thank you very much. Yeah, hi, good morning. It's actually a bit of a homecoming for me this year because 9 years ago, ASMS in Minneapolis was my very first proteomics conference, and that was the very first time talking about Spectronaut there. So it's kind of a celebration for me, yeah. Today I want to talk to you about Spectronaut 16 and the new features that we have. I can only go a little bit into it, not too deep, and also basically how this impacts your proteomics workflow, basically. The topics that I want to address today, so for the main new features that I picked that I want to show you, it's going to be Avalon, which is our improved machine learning framework that also my colleague Norman Overney already presented last year at ASMS. And I want to also show you DeepXIC, which is our new AI-augmented peptide XIC identification model. And of course, then show you how this impacts basically identification performance in Spectronaut 16 by comparing it not only to Spectronaut 15, but we also do a little bit of a comparison again against Diane. And also show you some specific improvements we made on the TOF platforms, because there we saw a quite significant gain additionally. So, about Avalon. Some of you might have seen the talk from last year from my colleague, but it's basically to go through the pipeline, basically how it usually works with peptide-centric DIA. You go and extract some XICs, you do some, measure some characteristics of these XICs that develop into scores, basically, and these scores are then fed into a machine learning model. In the past, we used an LDA for this. Do I have a laser pointer? Yeah. We used an LDA for this for the past almost 10 years, and it always served us well. And it gives then a nice combined scoring distribution that you can then use to calculate FTR on. However, in the recent year or two, we realized that this part is probably at some point a bit overdue, and we need to look into going a bit more modern in this stage. And so we decided to work on what we termed internally Project Avalon, which was replacing our old and dusty LDA and replacing it with something more novel. And now Avalon is comprised of a grading boosting machine, and we have in total 58 different scores that go into the machine learning for a label-free workflow. And this new machine learning framework dramatically improves what we can extract from our data, basically. And how does this impact, Avalon impact your identification performance? I have here a plot with a data set that some of you might know. It was published from Florian Meyer, and it's the EvoSep data set on the diapassive, where they did 3 different gradient lengths. And basically, you can see here the baseline of Spectronaut 15 and baseline of Spectronaut 16 using the same machine learning as before. And if we then enable Avalon, basically, you can see that we gain quite a lot of extra identification from this, just from having a more powerful machine learning framework. And this brings me to our second big feature already, which is DeepXIC, which is, I think, today the first time publicly mentioned what this actually is. We had this quite under wrap so far. It was inspired by the publication that came out in 2021, which was titled Dream DIA. And basically what it does is you take some peptide XICs and you transform them in a more matrix-like representation, because that works well with deep learning models. And you add some peptide meta, put it all into an AI model, shake it very fast, and then what you get out is basically what the AI model thinks it sees. So the AI model looks at it and says, like, yeah, this looks like a true signal, or nah, this doesn't look like a true signal. I don't like this signal. This looks kind of weird and wonky. And what this means in the end, basically, is that we have another very powerful score that separates very well also the targets from the decoys. And you can see here the basic C-score distribution of Spectronaut and DeepXIC, so without DeepXIC and then just DeepXIC alone. And you can see really nicely that it gives some extra information that you couldn't get from the C-score itself. So with Avalon, there is, the entire model that we generated has 3 million trainable parameters, and we had a training data set of 20 million data points that was split into, as usual, like training, validation, and testing data sets. And if you want to hear more about DeepXIC today, you can visit Dariusz, my colleague. He has his poster on Wednesday, and he will go a bit more into detail on what DeepXIC is. Again, the slide from before, how does it look now if we enable DeepXIC for our 3 different gradient lengths? And adding DeepXIC to the mix, you can see, is really also giving another quite significant boost. That in the end, we have almost 47% more precursor identifications compared to Spectronaut 15 on the same data set. We're using the same library even, so we didn't even regenerate the library. If you would compare library generation 15 to 16 on the whole data set, it might be even bigger. So this was the main 2 features that we added. Obviously, there's a lot of other stuff that we added, more on the cosmetic side, more usability features, some new plots, some new workflow improvements. So I want to go into the second section, which is the benchmarking that we do. We do quite a lot of benchmarking for every big new feature that we add. We have a pipeline that comprises of, I think, 40 different experiments of all different sizes and sample types and everything, and we can run every feature through this pipeline over a weekend, and then we can see how the performance changed, which we do quite regularly. And we see, for example, against Spectronaut 15, that we have an overall improvement on precursor level of 27% with some like great outliers, also so some that have up to 50, 60% more IDs. And on protein level also we see on 14% more IDs on median, basically, for a library-based search with Spectronaut 15. We also do the same thing for our flagship library-free analysis, which is DirectDIA, where we also made some quite big improvements. And you can also see that here we have 17% more precursor IDs on the entire set of different data sets that we use compared to Spectronaut 15. And we also see a noticeable improvement with 10% more IDs on protein level as well with DirectDIA. So again, just same raw files, same FASTA files, everything the same. It's just a new version of the software, and that's basically what you get out of it. Also, a little bit of a retrospective. I like this slide because it showcases a bit the differences that we made with DirectDIA since we first launched it, which was in when was Spectronaut 11? I think that was in 2015, 16, something. And you can see we got progressively better in identifications and also progressively faster in doing that. So if in the first version it was too slow and not good enough for you, then you might want to revisit it again because we got significantly faster and better. I will also talk a little bit about the underlying search engine for DirectDIA, which is Pulsar, and how we integrated MS2 search space indexing for even faster search times with DirectDIA for my Thursday poster. Oh, that's wrong. I said WH, it should be TH, obviously. Spelling mistake, sorry. Sometimes we also got asked about DIAN and how it compares to Spectronaut, and so I thought it might be interesting to also have a slide about this. And so we have our entire pipeline benchmark set up, and we can run Spectronaut through it, but we can also run all our benchmarks basically through DIAN. And as you can see here for the library base, so with a DDA library generated with Pulsar, you can see that we have, also against DIAN for protein precursor IDs, we have 20% more precursor IDs with Spectronaut 16 compared to DIAN 1.8. And about 6% more protein IDs on the same data set, basically. We also looked at our DirectDIA against in silico MBR, because there's also something that comes up quite often. And as you can see here, also here we have in median 14% more IDs on precursor level with Spectronaut and DirectDIA compared to DIAN and the in silico workflow. Some outliers where DIAN performs better, some extreme outliers where we perform much better. You might notice that there is only the precursor numbers here, because for the protein numbers, it's always really difficult to compare between software tools, especially with in silico MBR, because they use a completely different protein inference than Spectronaut does. So the numbers are not really comparable. However, I felt it interesting to dive into this plot a little bit deeper and showcase what the differences is, so which are those that perform worse and which are those that perform better. So I split the plot up like this. So these are the same data points, but now we have more information on it. So we have on the x-axis the number of runs that the experiment contained of. We have on the bubble size indicates the gradient length. I split it up into the 4 major types of samples that we have here. So we have cell lines, body fluid, CQE or LFQ bench type experiments, like this typical 2 conditions, multiple organisms, and 2 PTM experiments. And as you can see, for most of the biologically relevant experiments, which means more samples and body fluids, etc., we perform exceptionally well. We do underperform a little bit on these artificial CQE experiments because also they have usually very little number of runs. But I think overall it looks very good for Spectronaut. And if you're wondering what this bubble is here, that's phospho-PTM, which is a natural fit for direct DAA, which is just something that within silico libraries is challenging is an understatement. Yeah. So then I want to talk quickly about some of the TOF-specific improvements. So primarily this is in regards to the timsTOF Pro. You have already seen one slide of it, but I have another one. And also SciEx's new platform, the XenoTOF, where I think Birgit will tell you a little bit more about. And here also you can see that compared to Spectronaut 15 on the timsTOF Pro, this is a different data set, but we see very similar improvement numbers on protein level here, so 43% improved compared to Spectronaut 15. But also, this is one of the more quantitative measurements here. This is also an LFQ bench type experiment where we know the expected ratio for all our organisms. And we have this measurement where we say how many do we have with less than 20% deviation from expected. And there you can also see that we don't only gain more IDs, they are also still quantitative. So it's not just that we just gain more crap, it's really just we gain more identifiable peptides and proteins as well. And similarly, my colleague Tejas Gandhi's poster will be about this exact data set. Unfortunately, he feels a little bit under the weather, so he will not present his poster today, but I will jump in instead. So if you want to talk to me about this data set, you can visit me later at his poster. Unless he miraculously gets up and presents his poster himself, but who knows? And lastly, we have the improvements on the XenoTOF. This is also very brand new data that I got from SciEx directly, where you can see also with 4 different gradient lengths how we compare to Spectronaut 15 in a library-based search, and also here, like through all of the gradient lengths, we really made a big impact on the performance of Spectronaut. As I said, the primary driving force for these improvements are our new machine learning framework, Avalon, and DeepXIC that we integrated in all our workflows. And with that, I think, yes, I already hit the conclusion slide. So my conclusion would be that Spectronaut 16 improves on basically all the important fronts, and I think it's one of the biggest steps that we've made in the recent years in this regard. And with that, I want to thank our entire R&D team for this, because this is always a team effort. But I want to especially highlight 3 people here, which would be Dariusz, as I said. He was the guy who was primarily working on DeepXIC, and we'll present this later. We have Normand, who was doing all the grunt work for Project Avalon. And I also want to highlight our new head of AI, Anna, who is basically looking over all of the AI improvements that we're doing and managing those. And of course, I also want to thank the product support and marketing team for organizing this really, really nice breakfast seminar. Thank you.
Thank you, Oli. So we are going to have a Q&A session afterwards, so please keep your questions, remember them. And I want to give the microphone to Birgit Schilling. She will present a very interesting project about ischemic kidney injury. And we are happy to have her.
Thank you so much. Okay, such a pleasure to be here today. Thank you all for getting up early. Thank you, Oli, for pointing out some of these really cool features. And, thank you. Thank you, Sira. Yeah, so I've been doing work with Spectronaut and Biognosys since they started. And we really have shifted totally into using Spectronaut. In fact, we have 2 licenses because everything we do is mostly data-independent acquisition, and we run it through this pipeline. So I'm at the Buck Institute for Research on Aging, and we have a lot of different projects. But what I would like you to show you today is a project that we're doing with my collaborators in Pittsburgh And there we're looking at ischemic kidney injury. So I decided to show you the improvements of Spectronaut in a real project. And then Olli already said how many of the improvements really were really good for TOF instruments. So I'd like to show you some, in fact, with the XenoTOF instrument. But before I do that, I wanted to show you a little bit how do you process DIA data? And we've done many different things. So, for example, in the very early days, right, and we still do this, you can build DDA, deep spectral library from your study samples. And then you have exactly that tissue, exactly that instrument and gradient. So then first you build the library in DDA, and then you can take DIA in order to search against that deep spectral library. So we do that a lot. But then also, Olli mentioned, right, you can do basically the direct DIA workflow, and Spectronaut is really good for that. So basically, it's a library-free process where you take the DIA acquisition, you use it to build the spectral library, and then you use the same files in order to search them against this just generated spectral library. So I wanted to show you some examples today on the XenoTOF using custom libraries, and then on the Eclipse using the DIA direct workflows. And I show you here these two instruments that I will show you data from. And okay, so but the XenoTOF 7600 is a little bit a newer platform. So I wanted to show you a little bit about that first in 2 slides. So it's interesting to think about duty cycle. So that means it's the number of ions that get injected into the time of flight from the quadrupole, right? So let me demonstrate this for you. So sometimes there are challenges. Once they get into the TOF area, then they have to get pulsed into the TOF. And that can sometimes lose ions, right? So that's where this comes from, that the duty cycle is not 100%. So it depends on how the pulsing is being done and how the ions are released. So in the XenoTrap, what they have added is they call it XenoTrap. So what you basically do, as the ions come here into the quadrupole, the second quadrupole, when you then release them, you release the large ions first, so they all got simultaneously to the TOF region, and then you can pulse them all in. So that's really efficient, and that has really boosted the sensitivity. So let me show you some data. Okay. So this is a fun project. We induce ischemic kidney injury in mice. And the nice thing is that you can have the contralateral kidney, as a control. So it's from the same animal. And so we had 4 animals from each, and then we're doing the analysis on the protein level. And as I mentioned to you, we're using the XenoTOF 7600 platform. We're using data-dependent acquisition to build spectral libraries. We tested 2 gradients, 45 minutes and 120 minutes. And for the deep library, we did run each of the individual samples, but also those in technical replicates, up to 5 technical replicates each, right? So that's 40 acquisitions to build the library. And you mentioned earlier, the Spectronaut I'll show you is also really good in building the library more efficiently. But then, of course, we're doing DIA, and we're using either the deep spectral library or direct DIA. So let me show you that. Okay. So, but just briefly, the XenoTOF and DDA, we can take top 45, right, for MSMS. And, when we then do variable window, the TOF instrument is so fast, so we can use either 80 windows or 60 windows. And I mentioned we're using different gradients. We're using 80 windows, variable windows for the 120-minute or 45-minute, and 60 windows for a 20-minute gradient. Okay, how about the data? So I mentioned, building the library from DDA. I mean, you can actually see that this is a 30% increase on the protein groups, and we're requiring 2 unique peptides per protein, and this is grouped proteins. So I wanted to say that I actually, my percentages are based on the 16, right? So if we based it on the 15, it would be even higher. But it's really interesting. We have these increasements both on, the protein group level as well as on the peptide level. So this was quite remarkable for us, 30% increase. This is the library building, and we saw similar increases also in the other gradient length. This is now 120 minutes. So, just by building the library, you set your DIA processing up really nicely. So we were really happy about that. And this summarizes a bit the library building. But what was also interesting to us is that the 45-minute gradient gave almost as good data as the 120 minutes, so there was not a big downfall in it. And I wanted to say this is not a cell line, this is not a HeLa cell line, this is kidney tissue. And as you know, tissue always has a bit harder dynamic range, so we saw over 2,000 proteins in the spectral library, which we were very happy with. But now, what about the DIA, right? That's what we really want to do. So that's what we did now, and when we do the for injury versus for control, you can see that in this unsupervised clustering, we see perfect separation of the injury group and the non-injured group. So we were happy about that. The biology is actually quite interesting in these samples. And then if you look at the volcano plot, this is now the DIA data searched against this deep spectral library. You see that out of these 4,000 proteins, almost 2,000 get totally remodeled. So the injury is really short. It's only like a 10-minute ischemic injury where you just stop the blood flow in the living animal and then you reperfuse later. So a lot happens biologically here. Let's look at the improvements. So we tested both direct DIA, so we saw an improvement, but the improvements using the library were much nicer on this TOF platform, 27%. On the Eclipse, we actually see much higher improvement on the direct DIA, and I show you that at the end. But yeah, I mean, the improvements were really nice. The version 16, again, has like an almost 30% increase, and I mean, even 25% here on the protein level. Again, 2 peptides per protein. And this was true both for the 45-minute gradient as well as the 120-minute gradient. So, I mean, as you can see, we did a lot of testing in this, and Jordan actually spearheaded this. But it was quite fun, and it was really worth the deep XIC as well as Avalon are serving us very well in this project. So, basically, again, what we see is that the 45-minute gradient performs almost as good as the 120. And as you can see here, so these are library proteins, a little over 4,000, but we basically are then able to quantify out of the DIA acquisitions 97% of the library proteins, which is actually quite high. So if you have a really deep library, you can also in the DIA acquisition quantify almost all of those. And that was really true in, both for the 120 gradient as well as the 45-minute gradient on the protein and peptide level. So we were very happy about that. Okay, but let's look a little bit now that we have this deep library. We were thinking, well, what would be really interesting is even trying shorter gradients. How about a 20-minute gradient? Because we were so happy about the 45-minute gradient. And I may like to point out, this is in microflow, 5 microliters per minute on a Waters platform. Okay, and so these are DIA acquisitions searched against the deep library. And this is in Spectronaut 16. But you can see that even the 20-minute is performing still really great in the 120-minute library. And this is, and using the various different gradient lengths then. And this is again true on the peptide and the protein level. So if you have really a lot of samples, it may be worth to go to these shorter gradients. But how about the quantification, right? Sometimes people focus so much on how many proteins they identify, but in the end, it's really how many do change, right? And is the change robust? That's really the goal that we wanted to ask and the question we were most interested in. So I showed you already this 120-minute gradient, how the volcano plot looked. It actually looked equally nice almost with the 20-minute. You can see the numbers were a little less, but still a really nice remodeling, robust. You can see it there. But it's interesting, right? When we had the total numbers of proteins quantified, that was almost the same. But there is a little bit of fall off if you look at just the significantly changing proteins. So when you look at the just significantly changing proteins, the 120-minute had a bit an advantage still. So the question is, what do you want in your biology if you have 150 samples? I bet the 20-minute gradient is still great, right? But if you have the time and have very precious samples, for us, maybe we still would do the 120-minute gradient. So it's really interesting to see. And now let's see what happens biologically, right? I mean, that's really the question. And I wanted to show you that just with the example 120-minute library, 120-minute DIA, and then searched against the library. Because, I mean, really, in the end, the biologist, the collaborator, they are just interested in what is changing, right? Not in how many peptides you see, you know. So, okay, let's look at that. But before you can even ask what is changing, you need to, we like to make sure that really the statistics are good, the quality of the samples was good, the quality of the acquisitions was good. And one of the things I really love in Spectronaut is the very easy assessment of quality control. And I'm just showing you here a few super easy panels that one can just pull up in the software. So these are the 4 injury versus 4 kidney. You can see in the retention time regression, they all look really nice in the regression. You can look at the IRT peptides, the gradients were really stable, peptides eluted all at the same time. And then also this is a plot where you can look, almost everything is complete identification, some that are more than 50%, were seen more than 50% in the DIA acquisitions, almost nothing that needed the sparse features. So we were really happy about that. And then Ollie showed also really, you know, how nice now the, you know, really the search engine is performing here with the real positive versus false positive. So we were really thinking that this was good quality on all ends. But now, okay, what is changing? We see upregulation, high mobility proteins, pre-lamin, those are actually substructures. These are some of the major proteins changing. So that was interesting. And then going down, I mean, a lot of these things that went down are actually metabolic proteins, peroxisomal proteins. And this was interesting for our collaborator. They are interested in this kidney damage. So what really happens? It was really interesting when I showed the data to my collaborator. The first thing he said, wow, you see NGAL and KIM1 go up. And well, he knows those are the major kidney damage markers that are actually used clinically. And they went up 7 log2 and 5 log2. So that was nice, a nice positive control. What went down, again, is everything metabolic, lipid oxidation, fatty acid metabolism, and electron transport chain. These all went down. And so my collaborator said, well, that's why these mice are not doing very well, you know. They are actually interested in giving them a nutritional diet supplement, so then they get a lot better. But for us, it was nice to kind of establish this injury model. And you know, he was interested in fatty acid oxidation, and all these proteins and enzymes, part of that, you can see the log2, it's all downregulated, and then some of these Q values are -10, so really robust statistics. So my collaborator was very happy about it. And that's really, while I was excited about the data, he was much more interested in what really happened. So it's a win-win on all ends. And you know, I also mentioned the cellular senescence. These are protein changes. A lot of these are senescence-known proteins. Senescent cells stop dividing and then secrete a lot of proteins. This opens up potential interventions also in senolytic treatment. Senolytic drugs delete selectively senescent cells. And again, you can also have nutritional intervention. And then you can monitor with the mass spec whether these interventions work or not. Okay, so we were really happy about the TOF performance with the XenoTOF. But then my last 2 slides, I just want to show you, we also use, of course, our Eclipse system quite a lot. And this is work also primarily from actually Jacob. He has developed a really cool method how you can demineralize bones and then do proteomics on bones. That's very hard, right? I mean, the bone is not just calcium. We find over 2,000 proteins in these bones. And then Joanna has helped us a lot acquiring this data on the Orbitrap Eclipse. And then here we really like the direct DIA. And I mean, on the Eclipse, we never even do DDA at all. So there, the DIA direct works so well and it saves time, right, if you can just go with that. So let me show you, it's really nice. We see on the peptide level here with Spectronaut 16, a 15% increase. But again, I'm basing my numbers here on the 16. And then on the protein level, again, with 2 precursors, we see 1,800 proteins just in a couple of acquisitions here. So we were very happy about this also. And then biologically, very interesting, you see a lot of extracellular matrix and bone morphogenesis factors. So, I mean, doing mass spec on bones is a very different portfolio of proteins versus other tissues. So we are very excited about that. We're looking at actually bones of mice from AD models. Apparently, AD patients, Alzheimer's patients, often have more impacted bones that become more brittle, which is this bone-brain axis that we're looking at. Anyway, I hope I could show you today that with a real-life system that has real interesting biology, we see with Spectronaut 16 these great improvements up to 30%. And it's like Ollie said, it's the same acquisitions, we're just researching them. Okay, so, we see all these improvements, and I couldn't have done this without my group, and I really wanted to point out Jordan, and, well, I'm so grateful to Biognosys, who gave us early access to this Spectronaut 16. It really has improved all our work. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Birgit. Very nice presentation. Okay.